The country experienced a record number of journalist deaths in 2022. Criminal cartels and corruption have plagued the country for decades, continuing a cycle of violence.
A leaked 35-second video has just sent shockwaves through the halls of power in Washington and Mexico City. It shows a coordinated strike against a young reporter in a family taco shop. This was not a random act of violence. It was a professional hit filmed on GoPros by men who acted like they were untouchable. Now, for the first time ever, the United States is moving toward a massive security alliance with its southern neighbor.
The USS Gerald Ford, now off the waters of Venezuela. President Donald Trump deployed it to fight what he calls dangerous drug cartels there.
The brutality was so loud that the world can no longer look away from what is happening on the ground. The final alliance. The situation in Veracruz has reached a point where even the highest levels of government can no longer ignore the noise. On January 8, 2026, a young man named Carlos Castro was working at his family taco shop. He was only 25 years old and spent his time running a social media news page called Código Norte. He was not a famous anchor or a wealthy reporter. He was just a guy with a phone and a desire to tell the truth. But in a place like Veracruz, the truth is often the most dangerous thing you can possess. It was around 7 p.m. when the peace of the neighborhood was broken. A group of armed men entered the shop and fired more than 30 rounds into Carlos. The most chilling part of this entire event is that the gunmen recorded everything. They wore cameras on their gear and spoke over radios as they moved into position. This was a professional removal carried out by people who knew they would not be caught. They did not wear masks because they knew they owned the streets. This hit was a calculated message to every other reporter in the country. The footage was leaked online and showed the assassination squad talking to each other with total calm. They knew exactly where Carlos was standing behind the counter. Terrified customers hit the floor as the air filled with the smell of gunpowder. Within seconds, the young man was gone, and the shop his parents built was covered in red. This was not just a local crime. It was a loud statement that the government was no longer in charge of the state. The brutality was so blatant that it forced the Mexican government to reach out to the United States for a new kind of security cooperation. For years, the two nations have talked about working together. But this time feels different. The pressure from human rights groups and the international press has become too much to handle. President Claudia Sheinbaum is now facing a crisis that started just weeks after she took office. In her first 100 days, 11 journalists have already been lost. That is one person every 9 days on average. The world is watching to see if this new alliance will actually do anything, or if it is just another empty promise. The United States has offered to send resources and intelligence to help take down the groups responsible. But many people are wondering if it is already too late. The groups in charge have spent decades building their power. They have more money and better gear than many local police forces. This new alliance is being called an emergency security framework, and it marks a major shift in how the two countries talk about the border. But here is the catch. The secret routes that rule the Gulf. See, Veracruz is not just another state in Mexico. It is a place of massive strategic value. It sits right on the Gulf of Mexico and has some of the biggest port access in the entire region. This makes it a vital spot for anyone trying to move goods toward the United States. Whether it is fuel or other products, everything flows through these ports. For criminal groups, controlling Veracruz means controlling a massive part of the trade route. The coastline stretches for hundreds of miles, and the terrain is perfect for hiding activity. There are multiple groups fighting for this territory right now, and the violence is no longer just between gangs. It has turned into a total war for land. These organizations do not just move substance anymore. They have branched out into every part of the economy. They extort taxi drivers and small business owners. They even have a say in public contracts. In many ways, they have built a shadow government. The mayors and local officials are often just reading from a script written by the bosses. If an official refuses to play along, they are quickly removed. This creates a situation where the people who are supposed to protect the public are actually working for the criminals. This is why a reporter like Carlos was in so much trouble. He was reporting on things that the shadow government wanted to keep quiet. He exposed corruption in the police force and showed how the local authorities were ignoring the violence. Carlos had even asked for protection months before he was attacked. He told the authorities that he was receiving messages saying he would be ended if he did not stop writing, but his requests were buried in a pile of paperwork. No one came to help him because the people in charge were likely the ones sending the threats. This is the reality for almost every reporter in the coastal states. They have to decide between staying silent or risking their lives. Most people choose to stay silent. This is called self-censorship, and it has turned large parts of the country into information blackouts. In these areas, the only news that gets out is the news that the groups in charge allow. It is not just about fear. It is about total control over what people think and see. The ports of Veracruz are the engine of this power. They provide the money that allows these groups to buy the latest gear and pay off the right people. Ghost signals. The story of Carlos Castro did not end when he was put in the ground. Just 48 hours after his funeral, a new nightmare began for his family. His 23-year-old girlfriend, Wendy, and her best friend, Karemi, went to the cemetery to pay their respects. They were seen leaving around 5 p.m. and walking toward the parking area. By the time night fell, they were gone. Their phones went silent, and their families could not reach them. Then, in the middle of the night, both families got the exact same text message. The messages said they were in a city called Tuxpan. This city is known for being a very dangerous place under the thumb of the groups that took Carlos. It was not a place where these two women would ever go on their own, especially at night. It became clear very quickly that they had been taken. This happened right after the funeral, which shows that the people responsible were still watching. They wanted to make sure that anyone close to Carlos was also silenced. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Even the local governor confirmed that there was an investigation, but no leads were found. The attorney general even tried to say there was no link between the attack on Carlos and the missing women. Nobody believed that for a second. It was a clear attempt to cover up the truth. This is how the system works. They use fear to keep people from asking questions. If you look too closely at a crime, you might become part of the next one. The families of Wendy and Karemi are still waiting for answers. They are living in a state of constant fear, wondering if they will ever see their loved ones again. This is a common story in the region. People vanish every day, and the numbers are staggering. Some experts believe that the real number of people lost is over 300,000. The official reports say 100,000, but many crimes are never even reported because people do not trust the police. They know that the person taking the report might be the same person who helped the kidnappers. The use of ghost signals and strange texts is a tactic used to confuse families and slow down any real search. It is a cruel way to maintain control over the population. It is not that simple, though. The silent grave. The numbers associated with the systemic eradication of the Mexican press are not merely horrifying. They are the mathematical proof of a collapsing state where the truth has become a terminal liability. Since the dawn of the millennium, at least 162 journalists have been erased from the map of the living, a figure that represents not a statistical anomaly, but a targeted campaign of intellectual cleansing. Mexico currently holds the grim distinction of being the most lethal geography on the planet for those who carry a notebook or a camera, frequently outpacing active, declared war zones in its body count. During the previous administration, 54 reporters were liquidated, marking the deadliest 6-year window in the nation's modern history. Yet the current government is witnessing a trajectory of violence that is moving with even more terrifying velocity. The mechanical precision of this slaughter is bolstered by a vacuum of justice, so absolute it feels intentional. With over 90% of attacks against the press remaining unsolved, the message to those who would silence a voice is loud and clear. There are no consequences for the murder of an idea. This culture of total impunity has birthed a reality where criminals operate with the confidence of gods. They do not fear the law because they have effectively replaced it, creating shadow territories where the news is not reported but curated by the very cartels that benefit from the silence. This leads us into the darker, more speculative corners of why this persists. Some whisper that the level of unsolved crimes isn't due to incompetence, but because the archives of the fallen contain dead man's switches, digital troves of evidence linked to international elite circles that are only held at bay by the periodic sacrifice of the reporters themselves. There is a wild, persistent theory that the cartels are actually testing grounds for a new form of corporate state governance, where the press is eliminated to see how a population reacts when deprived of all objective reality. If you control the narrative by eliminating the narrator, you own the past, present, and future. Washington has begun to frame this as a paramount national security crisis, viewing the instability as a contagion that ignores the physical boundaries of the border. Leaders in the United States are increasingly vocal about direct intervention, arguing that the Mexican government is either paralyzed by fear or has been completely subsumed by the interests it claims to fight. Yet, some analysts suggest a more cynical layer, that the chaos is a manufactured necessity. Under this theory, the war on the press is a smokescreen for a massive clandestine resource grab. By keeping the border regions in a state of hyper-violent flux and ensuring no journalists are left to document the land deals or the mineral extraction, multinational entities can operate in the shadows of the carnage. The cartels, in this view, are merely the paramilitary wing of a global economic machine that finds the free press to be a nuisance to the bottom line. The new alliance being touted by politicians is presented as a final stand for the free press. But skeptics wonder if it is merely a new layer of surveillance disguised as protection. There is a haunting possibility that the programs designed to protect journalists are actually sophisticated tracking systems, intended to lead the executioners directly to the source of any leak. We are forced to consider if we are witnessing the deliberate end of an era, the sunset of the age of information, and the dawn of the age of the Great Silence. The demand for the illicit goods that fuel this fire comes from the north, and the capital that armors the assassins flows from the same direction. It is a closed loop of blood and currency that requires the death of the witness to function. Perhaps the most radical theory is that the silencing of the Mexican press is part of a broader global experiment in controlled information deserts. If a country as large and culturally significant as Mexico can be successfully blinded, the same tactics of localized violence and institutionalized impunity can be exported anywhere. The journalists who remain on the front lines are more than just brave. They are the last biological firewalls against an encroaching darkness that seeks to render the truth obsolete. They continue their work in the names of Carlos, Wendy, Karemi, and the scores of others whose voices were cut short, knowing that every word they publish could be their last. They understand that when the truth is treated as a crime, the act of reporting becomes a revolutionary struggle for the survival of the human spirit. If they fall, we don't just lose the news, we lose the ability to perceive the chains being forged around us. The question is no longer whether the alliance will work, but whether we are already living in the aftermath of a war that the truth has already lost. Does this new alliance actually have the power to stop the violence? Or is it just another political script? Let us know what you think. Make sure to like and subscribe.